Have you ever heard of a hori knife?
I think I have. I think that name sounds familiar somehow.
Okay, are we recording right now?
Yes, of
Oh,
course
then
we are.
never mind. I can't talk about it. I don't have a pre-show prepared. Let me think real quick. Was there something that I was doing yesterday? There's the video edit. There's the thing on the thing. I mean, we can banter on about potentially switching over to DaVinci Resolve. I don't know, like having just wrapping up this edit, I really want to grade more and more, like especially working with the F-Log 2 footage and dealing with all that. More and more, I want to do all my grading in Resolve. And as I learn to be a better colorist, and I'm watching all those Wazahahua, whatever his name is, videos and YouTube and this and blah 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 that. Resolve is just where it's at. Like if I'm doing any color work, I want to be doing it in Resolve, but the whole round tripping it is becoming more and more of a pain. And it's like if you have to do any final tweaks, you just can't. You have to get to a completed edit, never going to change any of the cuts or any of the transitions, then do the grade. Then you still have to go back to Final Cut.
Yeah, that part seems annoying. I guess what's always worried me about Resolve though is that in Final Cut, I know the tools aren't as powerful for color grading, but it's also really easy to do. I mean, I can just open up the window and tweak a couple of settings and it looks pretty good. Is it the same in Resolve or is it hard to get it to look good?
There's a steeper learning curve, like a significantly steeper learning curve in Resolve. Like it took me a good while to figure out how to even get to the point where I had a clip where I could grade it. Everyone's like, okay, we're in the color tab, let's get going. And I'm like, well, how do I get there? How do I get a clip from on my computer into this part of? Do I have to like make a timeline and then like put everything in the timeline? The answer is yes, but yeah, it's there's a bigger curve to learning it. But once you kind of get the basics and understand how the nodes work and everything, it makes a lot of sense. It's more like working in Photoshop or Lightroom. Well, probably more like Photoshop because you're dealing with layers and deciding like which previous things does this thing apply to and blah blah blah. And
yeah. So now that you've kind of learned how to do it, do you feel like you can quickly get a clip to like a rough color grade, or does it still take you a long time to get something that looks passable?
I feel like in Resolve I can get to something that looks what I feel like is 80% there in a pretty quick stretch of time.
Okay, well that's not too bad then. That's because that's kind of what I look for. A lot of times when I'm doing projects, I'm not trying to. I mean, sometimes I want it to look really good, but sometimes I just want to get it done quickly.
Right, exactly. And round tripping out of one editing software into another one and then back is not quick.
No,
it's annoying and things break and your sound doesn't necessarily work. And if you're using any plugins and effects or titles, it's just bad news bears. And like I know a lot of people do it and it's a workable flow of process or whatever, but I don't know. I mean, DaVinci Resolve started as just color grading, and so like that's how you used it, once upon a time. But I don't know.
So have you ever done editing in Resolve?
I've never edited in DaVinci Resolve.
I'm intimidated by that. I've used Premiere and Final Cut. They're very different. Although, I mean, I have to say it didn't take me that long to switch between them. I started in Final Cut and then I did Premiere for a little bit. And I mean, I don't know. The first project was a little slow, but it wasn't that hard to learn how to use.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I think that maybe having used Premiere and having used Final Cut, the learning how to use Resolve, maybe that won't be a huge thing. It's just, it's switching back from, I've learned the way of the magnetic timeline. And so, that's how I'm editing now. And now I have to like go through the whole, brain yoga to get into a world where I'm not magnetic timeline editing. Though I may be wrong with this, but I think you might be able to flip a switch in Resolve to have it act in either way.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Maybe that's not true.
I think that when I learned how to do editing, I was learning how to edit videos at the same time I was learning how to get good at Final Cut, and so I think in my head those two are very tightly coupled together, and I feel very comfortable in Final Cut because it's how I learned how to do it. But I think that probably like most things, the skill of knowing how to edit in terms of what clips do I want? Where do I want them to be? How do I want them to transition? I feel like that's the hard part. And then from that point, like learning all these tools is just learning how to use the tool. And that seems easier to me.
Yeah, true. Like, I don't know. For me, whenever I was switching from Premiere to Final Cut, a lot of it was relearning all the keyboard things. And I think that's another thing you can do in Resolve. I think you can just like map over all your keyboard shortcuts. Though I might be convincing that with Final Cut, because I know you can do all keyboard things in Final Cut. But like, V is your cursor in Adobe products, but A is your pointer cursor in Final Cut.
Right.
And like all of those things, blade versus cut, you have to relearn all of your short keys. And that's how you get fast at editing, is like you have one hand on the keyboard and you're like boom, 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 just switching between your range tools and your cuts and your whatever. And being able to do that quickly is how you edit quickly. And having to relearn all those things, it's a big lift, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Gerald done put out a video, it was like 3 years ago, on DaVinci Resolve 16, where he was talking about, like, he was still editing in Premiere, but he was, working on potentially switching over. And there was a number of problems that he was having that were, for me, like deal-breaking bugs. Mm-hmm. And I know that we're on 18 now, or maybe 19. Well, I have 18 installed. I don't know if there's a newer version. And like, it's 2 versions later, and it's been 3 years. Like, they probably fixed all that stuff, but I don't know without like getting into it.
Yeah.
And a lot of his problems were things that I was like, that would impact me, but I have no idea if I would have noticed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the good thing is that every YouTuber likes to release a video that's, I tried switching to Resolve for 30 days or whatever. And so you can probably just find one of those from this year, and it would tell you whether some of those things are still problems.
I think I need to grab a link to this video and tweet Gerald and be like, are these still problems? And should I switch to Resolve?
I think that's a great idea.
And maybe he'll answer my question.
Maybe so.
Because I don't know.
I mean, the thing we're dancing around here is that I think we both are a little annoyed with some aspects of Final Cut, and we both think that Resolve might be better in some ways. And so we probably just need to try it out. The
collaboration features and like the library taking up so much space, and it's just, I feel like Resolve has solved a lot of those problems, and it'd be really nice to do a collaborative edit and not have to like share a library on a hard drive or whatever.
I'm starting to get tempted to try doing the Big Ben project in Resolve.
Yeah, man, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. You're just asking for it. Do like a little thing.
Yeah.
And then like do like a, I don't know, like a highlight video or something that's, a minute long.
Yeah.
And if that works, then go big. But like maybe you can squeeze in a tiny little video before you do that full edit.
I bet I could. I don't know. It's pretty tempting. Might have to do that.
I think I'm kind of convinced to give it a go, and that like I did that kind of a vlog supercut of pointing out all the Corvettes, and
that would be a perfect use of trying it.
Yeah, and I think that maybe I'll do that in Resolve, because I mean I've basically edited that in Final Cut though, but I can just redo the edit. It's not a big deal. It took me like 30 minutes in the truck, so
yeah.
Woof. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the thing for next year, is like, let's try Resolve. Maybe we make the switch. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we need to try it out. And see.
It's frustrating. I mean, the whole reason I got a Mac was so I could use Final Cut. I mean, that was like 2016, but
yeah,
everyone's like, I wanted a small light computer, but Premiere was too heavy on small and lights at the time. And everyone's like, oh man, Final Cut's so good, it's so optimized, you can run it on whatever. And so I ran it it was a MacBook Pro with an i5 and 16 gigs of RAM. And it was a trooper. It did totally fine, and I could do all the editing stuff that I needed to, up to like 4K 60. It was, there was lighter footage then. Like this 422 10-bit is killing my M1.
Yeah.
I was editing that. It's XH2S footage is 422 10-bit, 320 megabit per second, H.265. And I'm, have some nested clips, and, but it's not a complicated timeline. And I'm like, I've used up all my RAM, and I'm like 30 gigs into swap, and my computer is like, you need to close some other apps. It magenta screened and shut down on me yesterday.
Wow.
Which never happens. And it's,
yeah.
The XH2S footage is beyond what the M1 MacBook Air can do.
Finally found its limit.
Yeah.
It always felt ridiculous to be able to edit 4K video on a computer without a fan.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised there was a limit. But
yeah, so that's
I did think about that with Resolve, that it does work on PCs, so that opens up a world of possibilities. But at the same time, I really like using Macs.
Yep.
And with the M1 and M2, I feel like the CPU is just as good as most of what you get, in like a laptop type thing. And I don't know. I'm staying on Mac regardless of which program I use. But
like, to finish that thought, I mean, MKBHD, he switched to Mac to use Final Cut to, maybe he was on Mac before, I don't know. But he switched to Final Cut because of the render times. Yeah. And that was the lighter load and the optimization and the render times was the reason that I switched operating systems, which is the whole thing. I mean, I was real, like, oh, Macs are down, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, I really want to use the software. And so I just made that whole switch. And now, 5 years later, 6 years later, I guess it's okay to move on.
Yeah.
It's a sunk cost fallacy, right? Like I put all this time learning in this new software, but maybe there's something better out there and I need to give it a shot.
Maybe. Find out next year. Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're back to talk more about the gear side of photo and video. So I think the first thing we wanted to talk about today was drones, which is something that a lot of people know about and a lot of people talk about.
Woo! You would be, as they say in the biz, an expert on drones.
Yes, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about drones, and I have owned Mavics and such for a few years.
You've built a drone or two, right?
I've built a lot of drones.
Didn't you build like a hexcopter?
No, I never did one of those.
Is that what that's called?
That they do make. There are hexcopters.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't do that. Not on that level. So I've been into them for a long time. And then everybody knows about the DJI Phantom and Mavic and all those. But there's been some news in that industry recently with the DJI Avata and some other things. And so we thought it might be cool just to kind of go through and talk about, what is the current landscape of DJI drones and drones in general, and kind of what should you look for if you're wanting to get a drone?
The new headsets for the Avata, those FPV first-person view goggles, seem pretty good. So cool to talk about that. But explain to me how this Avata thing actually fits or works for the FPV community. Because everything I know about FPVs is like these tiny little drones that aren't crazy expensive. You could build one for pretty cheap, or you can, $500 or whatever, and all the parts are replaceable because you're going to break it because you're going to crash into everything. And so it's like this, you see an FPV and then you see a Mavic Air 2S or whatever. It's like a totally different class of drone, totally different use case. And then DJI's coming in here with this Avata, and it's $1,000 drone.
Yep.
And that doesn't make sense to me. Like, who's flying on $1,000 FPV drone that they're going to crash?
Yeah. So I guess before we talk about that, let's talk about what the difference is between FPV and non-FPV, just to kind of
hit me with
make sure everybody's clear. So normal drones that maybe most people are familiar with is what I would call like a camera drone, something like a Mavic, where you can go buy it at Best Buy or whatever and pull it out of the box and take off and fly and get really good photo or video with not much effort.
They basically fly themselves.
Yeah, they have GPS. They will hold position by themselves. They'll basically fly themselves. So you have a little controller in your hand and you can tell it to go up or down, go forward and backward. It's like playing a video game, but they're very easy to fly. And I mean, we see people using them for travel and, whatever, with no effort whatsoever. You watch the view from that drone on like a phone. So you have your phone clamped into the controller and you can see what the drone sees. And I mean, I think most people listening to this are pretty familiar with this idea.
Like, get on with it.
Yeah. And so on the other hand,
I've heard of a drone before.
And so on the other hand, FPV drones, typically you would wear goggles, and basically it's you see what the drone sees and you're in more direct control of the drone. So you have the controller in your hands and you can steer it around and fly it. And every move you make of the sticks is causing that drone to move, in whatever direction. And there's a lot fewer safety features and a lot fewer automatic hovering features and things like that. And so it's more like you're a bird flying around and you can go up and down and you can do flips and rolls and you have a lot more direct control of the drone, which is, good and bad because it means that you can make cool movements and do cool things with it, but you're also at a much greater risk of crashing and you could get yourself into trouble more quickly, and it requires a lot more skill to fly.
And they're typically faster. I know that you can fly a Mavic or whatever 40 miles an hour, but you can take an FPV from 0 to 100 in a few seconds.
Yeah. You can go very fast with them, which is cool, but again, you can get yourself into trouble very easily. And there's this whole hobby around that. And so, you have consumer products, like we're going to talk about the DJI stuff soon, but there's also this whole hobby around building these things and people that race them and customize them. And it's this whole thing. And you can get ones that are as small as fitting in the palm of your hand, all the way up to these massive things that are much larger than a Mavic. And so it's this whole range of things.
They have them built for shooting movies. The movie Ambulance with Michael Bay has a lot of FPV footage in it, and they're running a red camera on an FPV drone, which absolutely nuts. Like that thing crashes, you're out 10 grand.
Yeah.
40 grand. Oh boy.
Yeah. It's kind of gone from, back in maybe 2015 or 2016, it was really just at a hobby level, and there were people flying these things around for fun and adapting things from the rest of the technology world to make drones. Like actually the first drones were built using the inside parts of a Wiimote. So like a Nintendo Wii has an accelerometer in it, and that was what people were using as like the control system for the first drones.
That's nuts.
So it's come a long way from that, and now people are using it for professional work and all this stuff.
So just real quick, like an FPV drone is still not a quadcopter. There's a microcontroller in there that's like doing the balancing and the leveling and that sort of thing. But if you don't give it any control input, it's just going to fall out of the sky.
Well, so it depends. Most of the ones you buy now, it has a microcontroller in it that's telling it, what orientation it's in, whether it's upright or not. And most of them do have like an auto level functionality where it'll stay upright. And they don't usually have GPS, so they won't hold their position. But typically, it's not just going to completely fall out of the sky if you let off of the controls.
Okay.
But they just have a lot fewer, safety features and flying assistance features than what you would get.
Yeah, like it's not going to auto stop or beep at you when you get close to a tree. It's just going to let you hit it.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe that's what you wanted.
Yeah. And it's just, they require a lot more skill to fly. I don't think it's something people should be afraid of, but you wouldn't want to buy an $800 FPV drone and just go out and start flying at 100 miles an hour without practicing.
Well, it seems like what DJI has done with the Avata is they've made it more consumer accessible to get into FPV. Because from what I know, up to this point, it's like, I'm interested in trying FPV, and I've done a little bit, but to me, it's like photography or computers or whatever, where like, oh, I need to know like how many volts these motors take, and like what kind of battery, and just like how many, like what does the voltage on the battery have to be to charge it, and like where to store them so they don't explode, and whenever I break a propeller, like what's the right thing, and I have to learn about. Hold on, let's see if I can remember from watching your videos. Nope, can't remember. I have to like know all of these.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a whole world. It's like
It
a
is.
completely
Yeah.
different hobby, and I have to like spend the mental time and energy to like learn it and like know everything about building these things just to fly them.
Yep.
But like if you're gonna crash and break them, you need to know how to put it back together, and it's a really cool hobby for that. But I feel like the person who's going to go out and buy an Avata maybe isn't necessarily the same person who's building a Cinewhoop.
Yeah. I think
whatever that is.
I think that's very true. For me, being involved in FPV, it has been hard to do it without knowing all that stuff. So I had to learn all those things, because when you crash, you want to be able to fix it. And you also kind of learn that whenever you want to get something specific, you end up having to build it rather than buy it, because they don't make a product exactly for what you want. So it is really hard to be involved in it and not know all that stuff. And DJI has been trying to change that. So they came out with the DJI FPV drone a year or two ago. It was 2020 or 2021. And then more recently, very recently, they came out with the Avata, which is their kind of next generation FPV drone. And so they are trying to sort of bring it to where it's more accessible to a casual audience. And what sets the Avata apart is that it does still have some of those safety features. So you do still have obstacle sensing sensors on it. So it's going to try to keep you from running into things. One really cool thing they've done is it has an auto stop, or not an auto stop, but it has like a brake button, like an emergency brake.
Nice.
And so there's a button on the controller where you can press that button and it'll immediately stop in the air and right itself and then just stand still.
Cool.
And so if you feel like you're into trouble and you don't have control of it anymore, you can press that button and it'll just kind of stop what it's doing, which is not something you can get on a home-built FPV drone.
Do you know how fast it can go?
I can't remember how fast it can go. That would be something good to look up, I guess.
According to the internet, 60 miles per hour.
So it can go 60 miles an hour. That's pretty good. That's, you could keep up with a car at that speed as long as it's not racing down a track.
Yeah.
So it's pretty capable.
Nice.
And Mavics go like 40, I think. So
yeah, something like that.
Good.
Depending on wind conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is a camera podcast, right? So you got a camera nerd coming in, and they want to get that sweet FPV footage. Because like you can't even get something like that with just a regular drone, like a camera. I want to say a camera drone, but something like a Mavic Air or a Mavic Pro, Mavic 3 Pro or whatever. You just can't get that same footage. You have to fly FPV, which means that you have to have the goggles and the drone and whatever and the skill set to fly it. But like, what kind of footage are you getting out of an Avata? And are you better off like buying an A6400 and strapping it to a homemade FPV? I mean, it feels like that would cost about the same.
It's just it wouldn't cost, it'd be more expensive to do the 6400 thing, but
Okay.
it's just a very different market in my mind. So, I mean, people are using FPV stuff for a lot of professional work. You mentioned the movie Ambulance, they have it. You also see it at F1 races now. So,
Oh yeah, for sure.
you see the FPV footage of flying around the track. They've got that.
It has a lot of that same. It feels like that same buzz or spark that the like original drone footage had. Because before consumer drones came out, if you wanted an air shot, you're gonna have to rent a helicopter.
Yep.
And the cost of like renting a helicopter versus flying a drone overhead it's like this huge drop in cost for your home video or your indie film project or whatever. And like the FPV thing, it feels like just the next step of that, where it's this type of shot that was impossible.
Yep.
15 years ago.
Yep. And so if you're Michael Bay making a movie, or you're F1, wanting FPV footage at your race, you're hiring a person or a company that is what they do. And they've probably built their own drones, and they've attached, some professional camera to it, and they're using some custom built thing. So, that's even more similar to like the hobby stuff I do, where you're building everything yourself.
Right. So you got the hobby level, you got the professional level. Very similar, and then somewhere in between is this.
And there is this big in-between thing, because FPV footage has also gotten really popular for doing tours of inside buildings or for real estate. And you see a lot of that now. We could probably put some videos in the show notes for people who want to see, but it's gotten really popular now to take a drone that has protection around the props to where you can fly it inside. That's something called a Cinewhoop. And it's gotten popular to fly that through a house and kind of make this like cool cinematic tour through a house. And I think that especially like for really high-end properties, realtors are starting to want that, because it's just an extra thing, and it's something that people appreciate and enjoy seeing, and it sets that property apart.
Yeah, and it's something where you're like, oh, I could get this on a gimbal, but then all of a sudden you're flying to the second floor. And you can't do that with gimbal necessarily.
Yep. And so you have this whole new category of things where you have people that are doing it for money, they're getting paid for it, and so they're professional photographers in that way. But they're not at the point that they're going to want to sit, at their workbench in the evening soldering motors. They don't want to be an FPV hobbyist. They don't want to be an expert in FPV. They just want to use it as a tool to do their job.
But you're still not going to fly an Avata inside a house, are you?
No, you certainly could. Yeah, that's one of the big things that's new about the Avata, is that it's the first DJI drone that you can actually fly indoors.
No.
So it has downward-facing sensors, so it can tell how far it is off the floor. And it has prop guards on it, so if you bump into a wall or something, it's not going to scrape up your wall. And yeah, you can absolutely fly it inside.
How big is this thing?
It's pretty small. So it's smaller than something like a Mavic.
Is it as big as a Mavic Mini?
It might be. It's heavier than a Mavic Mini, I think. But,
sure.
But in terms of actual physical size, it's very small. You could easily fly it inside a house.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So you have this Avata thing. It's more accessible for people who don't want to learn what the words Express LRS mean, and they want to get into FPV. But they're doing it because they want that footage, right? And like if you're building your own thing, maybe you're strapping a GoPro to it or whatever. That's probably what most people are doing to get the best footage. Yep. So what kind of video specs are we talking about here? Is it as good as like top of your line? You got your DJI Mavic Pro, whatever Cine, that costs $1 bajillion, but it has a 1-inch sensor and it looks great.
Yeah. And
then like the Air 2S, I feel like is a good halfway point of it has a 1/2-inch sensor. You get pretty fantastic footage, 4K, all this stuff. And then you can even do the Air 2, which has a 48 quad bear, and you can get really great 48 megapixel stacked, HDR photos and whatever. Is the Avata like in the class of the Air 2? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it more like the previous gen Mavics? What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna guess it's closer to something like the Air 2. So it has a 1/1.7-inch sensor, so a little bit bigger than a 1/2-inch sensor.
Okay.
It can do 4K 60. It has very good stabilization. I mean, in terms of FPV, it's not going to be as good as a GoPro, but it's definitely better than not having a GoPro, and it's so much simpler than that.
The sensor size is basically the same. So if you're only concerned about like what is the physical light gathering capabilities, I don't know what the megapixel counts are, but it's going to be GoPro is probably going to be a little better.
Yeah. I mean, GoPros will definitely look better. I mean, having seen the footage side by side, GoPros look better than this, but it's just so much simpler because you don't have this extra camera on top of the drone. You don't have to think about where it's pointed, because one problem you have if you put a GoPro on is you want the GoPro to be pointed the exact same way that the camera you're flying with is, and
but
you don't have to deal with any of that.
The camera you're flying is the camera that you're capturing with. Yeah.
And I mean, overall, the footage looks really good. I think if you're Michael Bay shooting a movie, you're not going to use this. You're going to want to use a cinema camera. But for people doing basic real estate stuff, or if somebody's traveling and they want to get cool FPV shots of their travels, I mean, something like this is going to be more than sufficient. And honestly, it's cheaper than what you could get even home built. If you were to try and build a Cinewhoop yourself and put a GoPro on it and all that, you would be basically at the same price. Now, if you're a hobbyist and you already have a lot of the equipment for other reasons, so if, let's say you do drone racing or something, if you do that and then you want to add on a Cinewhoop, then maybe it's going to be a little bit cheaper because you've already got goggles and controller and all that. But if you're just starting from zero and you want to do some real estate Cinewhoop videos, I don't see how you go with anything other than this. It just seems like it gives you everything you need. It's going to be reliable and work well. And honestly, the price is pretty competitive for all that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm looking at the video specs here and trying to find an Air 2S spec page. Oh, okay. It is 1/2. So it is, like you said, it's a slightly bigger pixel compared to the Air 2, not the Air 2S. So bigger sensor means a different sensor. However, with a sensor that size and having flown, these DJI drones, anything over like ISO 200 gets super, super noisy.
Yeah.
And you can basically clean it up, but it looks like the Avata doesn't have log. So like the Air 2S is significantly bigger sensor, and it supports the DJI log profile, so you can get the flatter image, you can do the grays and whatever. So it's definitely not Air 2S quality, but maybe it's slightly better in low light than the Air 2 with just because of the slightly bigger sensor.
Yeah.
It's still 48 megapixels, so I assume it's quad bare.
I would not assume that it's good in low light.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is like if you're shooting real estate, you're gonna have to shoot it at noon with all the windows open and turn all the lights on, and then maybe it's gonna be bright enough to shoot it at f200. But the dynamic range on this is probably only going to be 11 stops, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And that is a total guess, but it's probably in that range. And I don't know how you shoot real estate with this and it look good without blasting all the lights.
Well, but keep in mind that people do this with GoPros, and the GoPro is also not good in low light. Probably has a similar sensor size. We tested the 11 at higher ISOs and it did not look good.
Yeah, I guess you could shoot in whatever, like the HDR mode, which these DJIs do have, and it's similar to your phone where it takes the multiple exposures.
Yeah,
it does HDR video, so that's probably what you do.
Yeah, and do you think it's normal to turn lights on when you do real estate?
Oh, for sure. Like anytime in real estate stuff, you turn on every light. Bring in as much light as you can because, you're shooting your photos at f8 or f9, so. Yeah. It's kind of the same deal, I guess, where you're used to dealing with, the ISO limitations of your camera.
One thing you mentioned that maybe we should cover a little bit more is, the price concerns about something like that.
Yeah, for sure. You're going to crash it, right? Especially if you're new to FPV and you're getting into this thing. Like, how robust is it to run it into a pole?
So apparently it's fairly robust. People have crashed them like onto the ground, like fall out of the sky or whatever, and and crash onto grass, and it's survived quite a bit of that. DJI has also made this one a lot more repairable than some of their previous drones. So that was one problem people had with the previous DJI FPV drone, was that if you crashed and broke an arm, it was like you had to send it to DJI and get a replacement. It was it was not repairable whatsoever. And now they've made the Avata so that you can buy the frame by itself or the prop guards by themselves, and so you can actually swap out those parts if you need to, and so you do have that ability at least to repair it. You do fly this sort of thing differently than what than like an FPV hobbyist would fly their drone. You're not really going to get an Avata and do flips with it. You're not going to be trying to race through like smaller and smaller gaps between trees or fly under a park bench or at a high speed or whatever.
I can't do like a full loop? What's it called? Is that called a Cinewhoop? No, that's a drone.
You can do stuff like that, and the drone will let you do it if you put it in the full manual mode.
Okay.
But any sort of Cinewhoop style drone like this is just not really made for that kind of thing. I mean, if you think about these people putting GoPros on them and stuff, most of the time they're not trying to go crazy with it. You know, you don't really want to crash your drone and break a GoPro. And so something like this is not made for that necessarily, but you can take more risks with it than you would with something like a Mavic, and it is going to be a little bit more durable than,
Right.
you know, if you take your Mavic and slam it into a tree, it's going to destroy it.
Yeah, game over.
Yeah. And it does have those safety features too. So you can put it in some safer flying modes where if you're about to run into something, it'll stop, or, you know, you do have that emergency brake button. And so I think that if you're not trying to crash it, I think it does pretty good at preventing you from getting into too much trouble.
So do you think that DJI is hitting the market here for the people who it's clearly aiming at people who don't want to build their own FPV stuff or learn what Cinewhoop or Express LRS are, and then they're not on the high end thing where they're doing it commercially, and so they're slotting right down the middle there for someone who wants to pick up a drone and is familiar enough with like flying controls and wearing goggles that they feel like they could do it.
Yep.
I mean, do you think that this is serving that market well enough, and that, you know, it's not necessarily like a money grab because people are going to buy it and then crash them immediately?
Yeah, I think it is a good product, and I think it does hit a good market. You know, it's not cheap. The batteries are expensive. Batteries are over $100 each, which for FPV is pretty high. So I mean, there are still reasons to go the FPV hobby route, but I think this is really compelling for people that don't want to do that, and I think it looks good. I mean, honestly, even though I have Cinewhoops and can build them myself, I want to get one. I think it looks great.
Give me a cost comparison. If I was going to do like HD0 or whatever those buzzwords are, or get like a Cinewhoop that I can bump into walls in my house and then slap a GoPro bones on it.
Yep.
Like how much am I in compared to this?
Well, you can actually compare it straight across, because you can get DJI stuff that you can use on hobby drones.
Nice.
So you can get the DJI goggles and you can get cameras and all that.
Like, do they run on the same wireless communication protocol?
They can. Yeah.
Very cool.
Let's see. So you need a radio. It's about $100. Let's say the Cinewhoop itself with all the parts and everything would be maybe $400 or so for something that could carry a GoPro.
Sure.
So you're up to $500. The goggles would be maybe $400 or $500. Let's call it $500.
Does the Avata come with the goggles?
Well, they're kits that you can get. So
got it.
So I'm up to $1,000 on my thing, and then you need the GoPro. So the GoPro is another $500. $1,500, and then you need, you know, just like random little things, like you need batteries, battery charger, all that stuff. I don't know. Let's call that another $150 of accessories.
Sure.
So you're up to $1,650 there.
So it costs the same. So like if you can get an Avata, or you can go deep in on building your own deal. And like advantage of building your own deal is like when it breaks, you can start swapping out those pieces. You don't have to buy new goggles, you don't have to buy new whatever. But I guess if you bought the Avata and you were really into it and you were like, now I want to build a little tiny baby drone or whatever, you could use the goggles again. You could use
some of the same stuff. Yeah. So the DJI hobby FPV stuff does not work on the smallest drones. It's a little bit too big for that. But you can still build, you know, pretty small things with it. And I mean, yeah, I think that's where the difference would be. So I guess the Avata right now is $1,168 if you want goggles and a controller. And then the Fly More kit, so you can get some extra batteries, is $280. So what is that? Like that's like $1,400. And so yeah, the price is comparable there. I think the Avata is going to be like an easier out of the box experience. And so the reasons you would go the hobby route, one is that you get a GoPro. You know, we were factoring in a $500 GoPro. You can use that GoPro off of the drone. So that's an advantage. And then, yeah, the other thing would be if you thought you might want to do like some drone racing, or if you want like a little drone just to fly around your house for fun or to learn or whatever, then that's going to be a lot, like the incremental cost of that is going to be a lot cheaper if you've bought, you know, like the hobby level stuff to start with.
So like it's cheaper if you're building up to something of the class of an Avata. But if you wanted to just get your start, find out if it's something that you like, have something that totally works and you're not having to troubleshoot, it sounds like you can get in the door for less than $1,200, like just underneath or after tax $1,200. And then you can reuse the controller and the goggles, which is a $500 investment. And now really the drone's only costing you, you know, $600, $700, and that's what it would have cost you to build something equivalent that can fly as fast and carry as much and look as good.
Yep. And they do sell the drone by itself. It's about $630.
Really?
If you just need the drone.
I mean, I don't know, man. This actually seems really price competitive compared to what's out there. I thought it was way different. I thought we were talking like $500 between the hobbyist stuff and the Avata stuff. And clearly, I'm not in this world.
And like I said, if you're comparing to a GoPro, I think I said 500 for the GoPro, which be like a GoPro 11. That footage is going to look a little bit better than the Avata.
Sure,
but depending on what you're doing, that may not matter.
But then you also have to like calibrate the direction that it's pointing and all that sort of thing. For you, like you have everything that you could use to fly this. I mean, the goggles are probably more appealing to you, and the controller probably is. I mean, you might be happy with the controller. I have no idea, but you yourself could grab just the Avata drone and roll with it. Well,
and for me, I have a Cinewhoop, but I don't have a GoPro.
Right.
And so if I think about it, I'm like, I could buy a GoPro for $450, whatever the sale price is right now. I could buy that and I could put that on my Cinewhoop.
Sure.
But I could just spend another $200 and get this whole other drone, that has all these safety features, and I could let somebody else fly it and they'd probably have a good time. Like that's
a tough call, because like the GoPro is wildly more useful as a camera utility than a single use drone piece of equipment.
Yep.
But it is kind of appealing if you just need that really good looking FPV footage.
Yep.
Or just regular good. I guess really good would be way more expensive.
And I mean, the other thing is, like, I don't think that this is the only DJI drone people should buy, right?
Sure.
Like FPV footage is very different than what you get with a camera drone. And I think it's important to note that if what you imagine getting is hovering far off in the distance and I'm taking like an aerial shot of a house or something like that, FPV is not the right tool for that job.
No.
Like it's a more dynamic type of filming. Like
you're not even going to like shoehorn it into that look. This is like it's first person view moving through a space.
If what you want is a Mavic, then you need to get a Mavic.
Right.
But neither of these tools can do the other's job. So like the Avata can do FPV, Mavic can't really do FPV. And vice versa.
And like for all the commenters out there, they're fully aware that there's an FPV mode in the Mavic controls where it will tilt the body as you turn, but still very, very different.
Yeah, it doesn't look quite the same. You're never going to be able to fly it through a house. Like I don't even think the drone will let you fly it through a house.
I think I could
maybe. Once you lose GPS lock, it gets really upset.
Yeah.
And then if you crash it, like it's game over.
Yep. I did fly my Mavic through one of those FPV circle things once.
Yeah, you did.
And then I crashed it.
Yep. I remember. I think that, just to kind of cover all the bases, I do think we should maybe take a look at the whole DJI lineup and talk about what we think about the camera drones.
Well, yeah, like, so you were talking about the Avata, and like if you are looking for FPV stuff, like it's a pretty good option. But if you're looking for just drone footage, I mean, which of those, DJI drones are you looking at, or are you looking at one of the other brands? I feel like DJI basically owns the space. What's the name of that other one starts with an A?
Auto.
Yeah, Auto makes really good stuff too.
Yeah.
But I feel like the best drone for most people is probably a DJI Mini.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, their lineup has changed a lot over time, because a couple of years ago, I would have said the Air 2. I would have said that was the best. And the first Mavic Minis that came out, I actually had the first version of that, and I really wasn't that impressed with it. I loved how small it was, but it could not handle the wind.
Right. It was underpowered. It only worked on Wi-Fi, so you had like limited range, and it was okay. But the Mini 2 with the radios and the higher power motors, I mean, that's a pretty great drone.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better. Now they have a Mini Pro 3.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, and honestly, I think for most people...
Did that just come out?
Not just come out. It's been, a couple of months at least, but... Okay. I honestly think that's the one that I would suggest most people get. Some of this stuff's gotten more expensive. So the Mini Pro 3 is $760 in the US. If you want the Fly More kit with regular batteries, it's an extra $190. So you're looking at, right around $1,000, which is pretty high. But honestly, it looks really good. You get a 1/1.3 inch sensor, so that's getting close to a...
That's pretty good. That's bigger than what's in the Air 2.
Mm-hmm. It can do 4K HDR or 4K 60 video.
Nice.
And with that regular battery, it gets a 34-minute flight time, which is really good.
Wow.
You can get bigger batteries, though, and the bigger batteries get 47-minute flight time.
And if you put the bigger battery in it, it pushes it over that 249-gram weight limit.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of riding on the fact that you're flying somewhere maybe you shouldn't be, or you don't have the FAA regulation if you're in the US, or the stamp or sticker or whatever, because it's not registered, like putting a bigger battery in it basically puts you in violation.
Yeah, so you have to decide whether you want to do that or not. But even with the regular batteries, though, 34-minute flight time is really good.
It is really good.
It's still very small. It's smaller than a Mavic Air. So, I mean, that's probably the one I would go with.
I mean, I don't like the Air 2S is really cool, and it probably shoots better video, but I don't know if it's better enough to justify getting it over the Mini Pro 3 Pro just for the accessibility.
Yeah.
Like if you get this thing and the standalone controller, that is a really small package. Super easy to carry around. You don't have to necessarily worry about, am I okay flying here or not, because you're under the weight limit for the regulations, and so you can basically do more with it because it's kind of deemed as like a toy, but you're going to get as good as footage as something as an Air, probably better than Air 2, not quite Air 2S.
Yeah, it seems like they've finally gotten the Mini where it needed to be, to where it's a really good tool. Now you have an Air 2.
I do. I would consider selling that and buying this Mini Pro 3 though. This seems really slick.
And the Air 2, I couldn't tell if it's still being produced. It seemed like it was out of stock on DJI's site.
Yeah, well, they shipped the Air 2 and the Air 2S kind of 6 months apart and as like a tic-tac to each other, where one could do higher, 240 frames per second recording and could take, the 48 megapixel stills because it had the quad bear in it. And then the Air 2S was like, here's a bigger sensor, more resolution, you can shoot 5 point whatever K, but it doesn't shoot, more than 120 frames per second.
Yeah. And I have the Air 2S.
Right.
It has a 1-inch sensor. It has 10-bit color with log profile, which is really nice. And I mean, between your Air 2 and my Air 2S, I do feel like I can tell the quality difference.
Yeah, me too.
And the Air 2S is more expensive, so it's $1,000. Or if you want the Fly More, which if you buy one of these drones, you want more than one battery.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The Fly More is a total of $1,300. So
basically almost always worth it to get the Fly More combo.
Yeah. So Air 2S. Fly More, $1,300. Mini Pro 3 with Fly More is about $1,000. So it's a $300 difference, and the Air 2S is bigger. I think that just depends on how much you want to spend and whether you need the smallest possible drone.
Okay, so like kind of just backing off a bit and not just listing like everything that DJI makes. So like what their current like lineup is. You're coming into DJI, you don't know anything about it. They have like the Pro line, which they have significantly differentiated by price and capability.
Yeah,
and
that's the Mavic 3 Pro.
Yeah, the Mavic 3 Pro and the Mavic 3 Pro Cine, which that one has a terabyte of storage built into it, or something. And those are like what, $3,000 or something. They are very way high up there, and they've separated that out as like, you better be serious about this, or just give us your money because you don't care and you want the best thing. And then obviously like they have the for any body level, which is the Mini. And that one's probably the one that most people should get. And then somewhere in the middle here, they have the Air, and then they just released the Mavic 3 Classic.
Yep.
And so, like, I understand completely where, the Avata sits and where the Mini Pro 3 sits and where the Mavic Pro sits. But, like, with this Mavic 3 Classic and the Air 2 and the Air 2S, I mean, I don't understand the function. Like, what are those for?
That's a really good question, honestly.
Are they just like the Air? You could probably chalk the Air 2 and the Air 2S up to being old drones in the lineup. And DJI is rumored to have an event, like whatever, an announcement on the 13th of December.
Oh, okay.
And maybe they're going to come out with a new Air. I don't know. Some of the rumors said maybe another Mini, but that would be weird because they just came out. They could launch a new Inspire because they haven't done a new Inspire for years. There's also talk of like a mini FPV.
It's hard to know. I mean, because it seems like the middle kind of fell out of this market where the lower end ones got so good that for most people, that's good enough.
Right.
And then on the high end, people are willing to pay whatever price to get the best possible thing.
Right.
So that's where you end up with your $3,000 or $5,000 drones. But yeah, it's like in this $1,300 to $2,000 price range. It's like, why do you buy one of, why are you going to spend $1,600 instead of $1,000? And I think that's a little bit less clear.
Yeah, I don't get it. I guess it looks like the Mavic 3 has a 4/3 sensor. Is that like micro 4/3?
It is not an interchangeable lens,
but it's still a 4/3 size sensor.
Yes. So it's larger than a 1-inch. So that's pretty interesting. That Mavic 3 Classic that came out, it's a lot. That's what I'm looking at. It's a lot cheaper.
46-minute flight time.
It's a lot cheaper than the Mavic 3 Pro. which I think they made is called the Mavic 3 now. I'm not sure.
They do have a Mavic 3.
But
for all confusion, they have a Mavic 3 and a Mavic 3 Classic, and they sell both.
So the primary difference is that the Mavic 3 non-classic has 2 different focal lengths. So there's basically 2 cameras on it.
Okay.
There's a 24 millimeter wide camera, and then there's some sort of, I don't remember what the focal length is, but there's a zoomed in one. The Mavic 3 Classic only has that wide one, so it only has the 24 mil.
Got it. That 4/3 sensor, and that one's $2,000.
Yeah, and let's point out though that the Mavic 3 Classic is extremely expensive because the drone itself is $1,600.
Oh wait, well, it doesn't come with any of the other cool stuff.
The Fly More kit is an additional $650.
What?
And then you don't even get ND filters. And the ND filters are an additional $130.
Dang.
So if you want everything to actually enjoy using and flying that drone, you're looking at like $2,400.
Wow. Holy cow.
So
it's a $1,000 bump from the Air 2S.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And I just have a really hard time picturing a situation where I would want to pay that.
Yeah. I would tend to agree.
It does have adjustable aperture, which is nice. You can go f2.8 to f11. You can't do that on the lower end ones, but I don't know. I feel like if I'm not doing professional work to where I want like the Mavic 3 Cine or something, then why am I not just using an Air 2S?
Yeah. But like if you're using an Air 2S, it's not a far cry from the Mini 3 Pro.
Yeah.
And I guess those are, $400 difference in price, but that's a pretty good chunk of change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like the Air 2S is getting long in the tooth, and the Mavic Classic is a nice in between. You get that 4/3 size sensor.
Yeah.
But I would jump over in the line. I would say either like you're coming in, you're getting I guess like you just said, you spend $1,000 to get the Mavic 3 Classic. But I guess you can't really use the same batteries either. Like you have to get those specific batteries, or you have to get. Maybe you already have the controller or whatever, and you can use those controllers with other drones. But still,
DJI has started to learn that sometimes people have a drone and want to get another one, or they already have a controller, and so now you can buy a lot of these without the controller. You can buy the Mini 3 Pro without the controller, which is kind of a neat deal. Like if you want just the Mini Pro 3, you can get it's like $670, and you can just add that to your collection. So like I have the Air 2S, I could spend $670 and get a Mini Pro 3, and it would work.
Well, that's
pretty cool.
Conveniently cheap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of the same way I feel about the Avata.
Yeah.
Because I already have the goggles. I don't know if I would need a different controller, but still, it's like you pay a little over $600 and you get this whole other drone. It's pretty cool.
Man, I guess I don't need that in my life. The Mavic 3 Cine Premium combo is $5,000.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So I was going to ask you, I don't think we need to debate the uses of drones necessarily in this podcast. I think people listening know whether it's something they want or know what they would use it for. And we've all seen travel videos with drones and all that. We all understand that. But I'm curious for you, what would you do? Do you want an Avata? Do you think the FPV stuff would be fun? Or do you want a Mini Pro 3? What do you see fitting into your life?
Yeah, so I like the Avata a lot. I want to get into FPV. I find it really interesting. I like playing video games and stuff, and so I feel like I have a good grasp of like the controls and like how it would feel to fly something like that. I know that it's different because you actually have whatever weight and stuff to it, but getting FPV type shots and like flying a little more risky appeals to me, and not having to learn how to Cinewhoop or to HD0 or Express LRS. It's also appealing to me, and then the price seems basically right. So I like the Avata for that, but it's also very specific. And most of the time when I'm getting drone stuff, I want it as like, additional B-roll or whatever for a video that I'm making. And I would rather have to not deal with, I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. But like, you're looking at before you fly, and you're looking at, your airman maps and all that stuff just to make sure that you're not flying somewhere you shouldn't be, or you're not in a weird zone. But, sometimes that stuff is a little more aggressive than it needs to be. And like, you're like, there's nothing above me. I'm going to fly 100 feet up in the air, get the shot, and it's going to be safe. It's going to be fine. I'm watching it. It's not going to fly out of my sight. And being able to just do that with something that weighs less than 250 grams and not be worried about the FAA rolling up in their black sedans and throwing you in the back and, taking you to FAA jail which is actually an airplane that flies around the earth with padded walls, and they just go up and down. You just smack against the sides, and they're like, "Are you going to do it again?" You're like, "No, please, no. You're going to fly again? No, please, no." So that's not going to happen with a Mavic Pro Mini. If I was starting from zero, that's what I would buy. But having flown the Air 2S and like getting just really phenomenal footage out of it, but also noticing sometimes the detail just isn't quite what you want it to be.
That's always my thing with drones, is that they look great from a distance, but you do not want to try and crop in or zoom into 300% or whatever. It just falls apart. It's like phone phone cameras.
Anything above ISO 100 is just really noisy, and it was a very notable difference from the Mavic original to the Air 2S, as far as like if you look at trees where you have a lot of fine movement and the camera and all this stuff, it's doing compression, right? It's doing H.265 or H.264 compression, where it's like comparing two images and then it's only saving the differences between the two in the algorithm and whatever and compressing the video.
Yep.
And the way that the DJI is doing that with that smaller sensor and like the resolution of the glass and the resolution of the sensor and like all the compression with the leaves and everything, if you're like flying over something and you have a lot of like foliage below you, even still with the Air 2S, it can get really messy.
Yeah, it's kind of muddy looking.
Yeah, and just not look great. And so if you have like something that is very detailed or busy or has a lot of movement with it in the shadows with these drones that have less than a 1-inch sensor, it just doesn't look great. And you kind of have to like hide it or cut around it or whatever. And so for the stuff that I shoot, something like a Mavic 3 Classic or whatever that has that 4/3, I mean, I want the biggest sensor I can get in a drone,
right?
Because I know that like light gathering, maybe not so much of an issue. You're up in the air, flying in the daylight or whatever. But sometimes you're going to fly, just before twilight or just before civil twilight, and get, here's the sunlight, or I need the dynamic range to like boost the shadows later because I'm shooting like the bright sky and the ground below, and so you have these huge dynamic range scenes, and it's just. I always feel like the shots that I want to get with a drone are pushing the limits of the drone's camera. So I would want to spend as little money as I could to get the best camera that I could.
You don't say.
Yeah. So I guess like if you can fly a Mavic 3 Classic with the same controller and everything that comes with the Mini Pro 3,
I think you can.
To me, there's room for both. Of like, I need to get the best footage, or I need something that I can just fly.
Yeah.
And then the Avata is a completely different class. So it's like, for me, I can see a use case of owning all three of those, but I'm never going to buy all three.
Yeah.
So like if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the Mini Pro just because it's more versatile and I don't have to worry about so much if I'm, breaking the law or anything. And also it'll fit in more bags.
I have to agree. I mean, the FPV stuff is really cool, but it's never going to be as casual. You can go on a trip and you can have something like an Air 2 or whatever, and you can take off and you can fly it around and you can be chatting with the people around you. It doesn't require 100% focus. You can probably do it before you've had your morning coffee. You cannot fly an FPV drone and communicate with the people around you. I mean, it requires full attention, and you're wearing goggles on your face. So you can't see anything, and it just requires a lot more focus. Like, to me, it's not as relaxing as flying a camera drone around.
Well, yeah, you need to have a more iron stomach. You got to have someone watching your back so no one's like, painting pictures on you or whatever and like trolling you.
Or make sure you're not like stumbling off a cliff or something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's just a good rule for a lot of this stuff. Don't walk and look down at the same time.
Yeah, I think I agree. The Mini Pro 3 looks really cool. I think I would have been tempted to get it over the Air 2S if it had been out at that time. The older Minis weren't really good enough for that, but now they are. And yeah, it's just gotten interesting. And like I said, it kind of feels like the middle of that market has fallen out a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
Now you have low-end stuff that's still really good, and then you can spend thousands of dollars if you need the best possible footage.
So what if you had to guess, I don't know if you've looked at any of the rumor sites or whatever, what do you think DJI is going to announce in December? Do you think it's going to be more drone stuff, or do you think it's going to be more Ronin stuff? I mean, they came out with a new gimbal this year, but the camera, what is it?
The Ronin 4D?
Yeah, but that's over a year old, right?
I think it is over a year old, but honestly, I think it'll be an Inspire 3. So
yeah,
that's their high-end professional interchangeable lens, has a micro four thirds camera on it. And that's that drone. I think the new ones are $7,000 to $15,000, maybe somewhere in that range. So it's very high end, but I honestly think it'll be that. The reason I think it'll be that is because the Inspire 2 has been out for a long time. So
it came out in November 2016.
Yeah, so it is overdue for an update. And most companies don't want to do a consumer products release at this time of year because it's too late
Right.
for holiday shopping. But nobody's buying an Inspire 3 to put under the Christmas tree. And so to me, that's what fits best.
Then what are you getting me for Christmas?
Well, here's the thing, is that
So-
if the Inspire 3 comes out, the Inspire 2 is going to be a lot cheaper on the used market.
Sure.
So that's interesting.
It feels like if they came out with an Inspire 3, they're needing to compete with, something that can carry a Red or a Komodo or whatever, people who want to buy, or not people, but like productions that want to spend $10,000 for a quote unquote cheap, like cine rig, and then slap it on a drone and fly through and get these amazing shots. And I don't know what you buy out the box to get that. I mean, you're just going to hire a drone company that has something that can do it, I guess. So maybe this is much more accessible. I mean, I don't know, like, right? What we don't know what's going to come out with.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels like it has to be able to mount a variety of cameras that you can plug in via the USB-C port or whatever and control that camera, or like you can run your follow focus through and all that. And with the 40S that they've come out with, they have that, right? If they could just take a 40S and then hook it up to a drone, like maybe that's the solution, and maybe that's what they do.
I think that's what it is. I think they take the Ronin 4D and put that on a drone, and they've got the DL mount, lenses, and
that's all Super 35. I mean, you could go out and grab yourself a Laowa nanomorph, and then put it on this Inspire 3 and get some pretty sweet stuff.
Yep. So that's what I'm expecting to see, especially if it hasn't been updated since 2016. I mean, that's 8 years old.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think that's probably what's going to happen, but I guess we'll find out.
All right, cool. Very exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll talk about it if, when, whatever happens.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
All right. Speaking of Christmas, there's been, a lot of Black Friday deals that we've been watching and price drops, and a lot of that was on follow focus, which we've talked about a little bit before, and something you're interested in. What's happening in the follow focus market right now?
Yeah, it is interesting. The first one I saw was that the Tilta Nucleus-Nano was back down to $200. So I say back down to, because there was a time when it was like 200 or 225 or something, and then somewhere around when COVID happened, it jumped up to 300, 320.
Holy cow.
And so big increase, but they dropped it for Black Friday.
That's surprisingly cheaper than the Smallrig Magic Fiz.
So the 200 is definitely cheaper. It's pretty competitive. It's interesting to see them doing that. And I was tempted when I saw it. I was tempted to get one.
Do you think it has anything to do with the competition in the market, or do you think they finally caught up on supply chain, or is it because of the rumors that we're hearing? It
could be all the above. So for one thing, there is a rumor now of a Tilta Nucleus-Nano II.
Dum.
And there's a video that dropped near the end of October where they announced that might be coming, and they showed some stuff where you can't really see too much in the video. But
it's a video that the Tilta dropped.
Yeah, so it was like a little teaser video.
Oh, okay. A sneak preview.
Yeah. The two things they said in the video that were interesting. One was that it's going to be 60% cheaper.
Hey yo.
Which.
Wait, 60% cheaper than a $200 Tilta Nano?
They probably. I mean, I assume they mean the non-Black Friday price. Mm-hmm. But even still, if it's 60% cheaper than $320, that's really cheap.
That's 140 smackaroonies.
Yeah, and so and then they said something like 200%. What did it say? 200% more capable, 200% more powerful, something like that.
Boy, that sounds like buzzwords to me.
No, it was less than that. It said 200% improvement.
Oh,
so whatever that means.
I mean, you take the like normally if you did a 100% improvement, that would be double.
Yep.
And so this is four times
as good.
4 times as good in all the metrics. It's gonna be 4 times lighter. It's going to be 4 times stronger motors. You're going to be able to use it from 4 times farther away.
Right.
That's what I'm reading here.
All of that.
Yeah, for $160 less money.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So that all sounds a little bit hard to believe if you ask me.
I know that's what they said.
But I don't know. And they did say it's going to be compatible with the existing Nucleus-Nano and the existing Nucleus M. So that means if you already have Tilta follow focus stuff, it's going to be compatible with that. So
that's going to be really handy because this is going to be 4 times smaller. So
yes. So maybe that's why. Maybe they're trying to clear out old stock. That could be it. And another thing you mentioned is that there's all this new competition. And I do think that's something I want to talk about a little bit, because I think the Nucleus-Nano was the first one in kind of this lower end
Prosumer, accessible. I hate myself for saying that word, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, like the Axoon like just came out. The Magic Fiz just came out, and they are directly competing with this Tilta thing.
And honestly, they're better. Like I think the Nucleus-Nano has been outclassed by some of this newer stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of things that, I mean, we even had problems with the Nano, but ignoring that, I mean, it's the screen and the torque on the motors and all this stuff. I mean, the Axoon seemed really appealing. The only downside that I saw on that one was the lack of handle options.
One thing that I liked about the Nucleus-Nano was that you can buy these extra handles for it. So if you want like a hand grip for your camera that has a focus wheel on it and has a battery, Tilta will sell you that. They're very expensive. They're like $200 for that handle, but you can buy the handle. And so it's neat that you have this ecosystem where you can get a handle that goes in your camera, or you can have a little knob controller that like a First AC could use. Like you have these different options. And that was something that none of the others really had. But in spite of that, yeah, it's like Axoon came out with this FC01 follow focus system. It's about the same price as the Nucleus-Nano. It has a better screen than the Nucleus-Nano. And another thing I really liked is that you can attach the controller to the motor with just a wire. So if you don't want to use it in a wireless mode and you don't want to have to power the motor separately, like if you're just building up your little
wire will deliver power and control.
That's right.
That's nice.
And I mean, that just seems like it would reduce a lot of unreliability. You know, you don't have to worry about it losing connection.
It's a cool feature, but the handle that comes with the Axoon is like a typical wheel style. It's not supportive. And so you're not going to be able to hold the camera and do that at the same time. So that it's a cool feature, but it feels like a weird add to a handle that's not built for it.
It's hard to say. I mean, you could still, like if you had a top handle, you could hold the camera from the top handle and use that knob. If you had a shoulder rig, you know, you could be holding the camera with one hand and using the knob. So I think there are some ways to use it, but I agree on the Axoon, it's a little bit of a niche thing.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, the Smallrig Magic Fiz, we talked about that one a couple episodes ago, and that one came out recently too. It's again in a pretty similar price bracket. It's like in the Nucleus-Nano before the sale. You know, it's in that price bracket. It's like $300 with the knob controller, or $400 if you want the hand grip instead. So the Magic Fiz has hand grip options, which is nice, and it also has that ability to attach the motor directly to the controller, which makes a lot of sense if your controller is a hand grip.
So follow focuses are cool. I've used one type of follow focus, but I haven't done a ton of research, and because I have trouble like imagining myself use one, except for if I'm like, someone's running a gimbal and you need a separate focus on it or whatever. In like bigger productions, your focus puller is a totally independent person, blah, 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 blah. But to me, I'm like, okay, what am I getting different for the money here? These are all, within maybe $100 of each other. And it's like, so it doesn't really matter maybe necessarily on price, or if they are all exactly the same, why not just buy the cheapest? And so I'm looking at all these trying to figure out, okay, like why would you get one over the other? And it seems like the Nano is in need of replacement. Yeah. And then the Axoon and the Magic Fiz are new. And so like talking about batteries, the Nano, you have to power the motor that's on the lens or touching the lens by DTAP.
Yeah, DTAP or USB.
Or USB. And so you have to run it to some other battery that you provided. And the controller uses these stupid rechargeable, they're not even like AA or AAA or whatever, single A. They're huge. It's like this cylinder.
I think it's an 18650. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a proprietary battery.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have 18650s lying around. That's my point.
Because you're not in an FPV hobby. I have so many of them because so much FPV gear uses them. But yeah, most people don't have those.
Okay, this is making more and more sense. So if you're into FPV, maybe you're thinking about the Nano more. Okay, so weird FPV batteries and DTAPs. You go into the Axoon. I don't know what this one uses.
So the Axoon, the hand knob thing, uses, what is it? It's a Sony NPF W50, which is not a Sony NPF battery like you're thinking. It's a little Sony battery that's used in like I don't know, like the A6400, like that type of camera.
Okay.
And so it's this extra battery type you have to get. And, what if you're not a Sony shooter? What if you don't have that battery? So that's a little annoying.
All right. So, but does the grip and the motor use the same thing, or does the motor have to be powered separately?
So you can connect it with a wire.
Right. But if
you do that, that powers it.
Right. But if you're not anywhere nearby, like you have a separate camera set up, you're over there. Mm-hmm. How are you powering the motor for the Axoon?
I think it's similar to the Nucleus-Nano, to where you have like a
BYOP.
I think
whatever.
They may have USB-C.
Okay.
As an option.
Does it have a D-tab as an option?
I think so.
Okay. So you have options versus the Nano, which you don't. There's one connection on that stinking thing. And it's always loose. And I hate it. And then the Magic Fiz, you can mount an NPF on the motor itself. Super cool. Or you can power it via USB-C.
Yep. Or you can power it from either of the controllers.
Right. So that's cool. And then the handle powers via Canon internal batteries.
LPE6.
Which the stupidest choice. To me, if they had made it so that you could power the handle or the thing by, can't never remember the name of LPE6 battery on both, or NPF battery on both, that's the winner to me.
Yeah.
Like, boom. Forget about all the other features. These things use the same stupid battery. That's just really annoying.
That's weird.
That feels like they could have just took it, because to me, having the option to mount a battery directly on the follow focus and not have to run wires, because I'm just thinking about last time I used a follow focus and had a gimbal and having to deal with like a wire bundle that runs down to my collective battery thing on the sled, and having to not hit it with there's so many freaking times that I'm like, gliding along and I bump the stupid wire bundle with my hand or whatever, and the whole camera turns and it's like, well, cut, we got to do the whole thing again.
Yep.
So being able to just mount it directly on that's huge to me. That feels like enough of a difference to make the Magic Fiz a winner here.
I think the way they did the batteries does make sense. I thought it was weird at first that the two things use different types, but to me, it's like there's two main uses of a follow focus. One is like I have my own camera rig and I want to be able to pull focus without having to touch the lens. And if you're doing that, you're probably using the hand grip controller to where you have like a little thumb wheel that you can turn. And then that's going to be like on your rig with the follow focus motor. And so at that point, you just run the cable, and then you have one LPE6 battery that powers both units. And that's pretty straightforward. And then the other case is like you're on a bigger production, you have a first AC pulling focus. And at that point, you're probably going to have the knob controller completely separate, has an internal battery on it. And then you're going to need to power that focus motor. And so you could either run a D-tap if you already have V-mount batteries on your setup, or you could use that little NPF plate and power it that way. And so I don't think there's that many cases where you're actually using both the Canon battery and the NPF battery at the same time.
I guess also an NPF battery is typically mounted externally, and an LP6 battery is typically mounted internally. And they're able to make a more uniform grip by using an internal sliding battery. Yeah, that's
right. Because there's so many different sizes of NPF batteries, you can't really make something that slides into a
you'd have to be really specific. That has to be an NPF 504 or whatever.
Yeah. So I think that's why they did it.
Okay. I'll let that slide. Can you power the handle separately, or I think you could use a dummy battery, but does it also have like even leaving it empty and then you can run it from your V mount that you have on your rig?
All of these things have a USB-C power input, and you can get a D-tap to USB-C.
Nice. So but would I have to run two separate ones? Like if I had V mount on my camera rig, do I have to run USB-C to the follow focus motor and to the handle, or can I run it to the handle and the handle to the motor?
I'm not sure. I bet you can daisy chain it, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, cool. So we don't know that for sure, but I guess worst case, you could run a D-tap to a dummy LP06 battery. Did I get that right?
LPE6
battery, and then you could USB-C to the follow focus motor.
Yeah.
I don't know. That seems pretty cool.
Yep.
Right.
These systems all seem interesting to me. I mean, it feels to me like something that if you're not on a big production, most people don't need this, but I don't know. It's just something I want to learn about and know how to use, and I think they're cool.
Okay. Other differences. What's the difference besides price? We talked about battery, grip availability, right? These all use different technology as far as how they're communicating to each other.
Yeah, they're not interchangeable.
Yeah, so not interchangeable. So you have to buy like the Magic Fiz thing that works with the Magic Fiz thing. And it seems like the Nano probably has the most available gear for different focus
Yeah,
things.
I think I'd say that.
And then the Axoon has one option, and maybe they'll come out with a grip later, but they don't even have a handle for it. It's just the wheel, the knob thing. And then the Magic Fiz has multiple handle options, left and right.
It has I think there's a single handle controller and a knob controller.
Oh, I guess the handle controller can be mounted left or right. It's like reversible, and then they have a knob controller. So it seems to me like the Magic Fiz has everything you need now. The Axoon doesn't, but maybe cheaper and cooler, and then the Nano is just old. So if you want a Nano, maybe wait for the new one whenever that comes out next year.
Yep, I think so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's obviously the difference in the screen, and like the Nano screen is not as bright, but also, I mean, like the screen like a freaking postage stamp. How much does that matter?
Well, I mean, you do end up using that screen for a couple of things. So for one thing, if you want to set A/B points on these, you need to use the screen, to kind of see what you're doing, I think.
Okay, and I guess if you can't see the screen, then that's a problem.
Yeah. You also, like, usually there's some menu options. So if you want to change the direction of the knob, make it clockwise or counterclockwise, that's something that you need from the screen. So, I mean, I don't think it's a deal breaker, but it's a downside that screen is as dim as it is.
So, I mean, are you going to buy one of these?
I don't know, man. I'm tempted.
Magic Fiz is what right now on sale?
Well, so with the knob controller and the motor, it's $220.
$220 for the Magic Fiz.
So it's right around where the Nucleus-Nano is.
So that is just with the knob, not the knob and the handle.
That's right.
The handle will be a different bundle.
Yep.
And then the Axoon is $223 on sale right now. So basically the same price for exact same configuration.
Yep.
And then the Nano is $20 cheaper.
Yeah, it's $200 right now. So,
geez,
that's all in the same range.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
The Smallrig one with the hand grip is $320. And, I feel like if you're a solo shooter, and you want to just have like a rig where you can hold onto a hand grip and focus that way, then that's probably what you want rather than the knob. And that's $320. Whereas like from Tilta to get that same setup is probably going to cost you closer to $400 because you'd need the $200 kit and then an add-on handle. And those handles are like $200. So
how much is the Magic Fiz handle?
If you buy just the Magic Fiz handle by itself, the normal price is $220. Right now, it's on sale for $175.
Okay, so similar.
Yeah,
man, that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
I guess another thing to think about is like, what are you going to use this on? I mean, maybe you build out a shoulder rig or whatever.
Yeah,
but like, depending upon, and like Fuji's can be bad about this depending upon the lens. Like you can set linear in Fuji menus, and I'm bringing up Fuji because that's what you're shooting right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can set linear for whatever your lens is, but some of those lenses, even on linear, have really short throws.
Yep.
And so like I was looking at the 23 1.4 that came out this year with its new linear motor, and in manual focus, the throw from infinity to zero is really, really short.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess for these things, you could program AB as like, if it's like a half turn of the lens, which would be really dumb. You could program AB as a half turn, and then you could have a really wide turn on your wheel for the handle, and have like a more fine control of the focus.
Yeah, that's always how you do it. So you calibrate these things with the lens, and you calibrate it to the extremes of the focus, and then it makes the entire throw of the knob, which is like, on the knob controller, it's usually like 320 degrees or something, so it's almost a full rotation. And you calibrate that to be like the entire focus throw of the lens. So it can give you more precise.
So like it democratizes the, like, if you have a bunch of different lenses that have different throw lengths,
it makes
as long as they're linear, you can make it so that it basically behaves the same way for you no matter what lens you're using.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, and you can set separately from that, you can set an AB focus pull.
Cool.
So if for this one shot, I need to pull focus from this spot to this spot, you can set that. And then that makes the entire throw of the knob from your A point to your B point. And so you could repeatably do this focus pull, which might be useful for whatever you're trying to do.
I was trying to think if there was any issues that you might run into with like any of your current cameras or whatever. Do you have any like micro four third lenses that are non-linear and that you can't make operate in a linear focus manner?
Well, yeah. So on the GH5, you don't have the ability. It's a camera setting. It's not a lens setting.
Right.
On the GH5, you do not have the ability to set linear focus.
Okay.
So it's always the accelerating, like it.
So how do you deal with that with a follow focus? I mean, you can set the, out and in points, but now it's not linear.
So I mean, it's the same as using the lens. Like if you think about it, when you turn that knob on the follow focus,
right,
it's basically like your hand is moving the ring on the lens.
Right.
And so if you move from 0 to 100 on the follow focus knob, it's still going to move the lens from 0 to 100, but it's just going to do it faster, slower, and it's not going to be like a
So I guess if you're dealing like the worst case scenario where you have a lens that doesn't have hard stops on the focus ring, so it's like full focus by wire, and the camera doesn't have a linear focus mode, so it's always accelerating and always, you know, infinite both directions. You would set up the follow focus motor to have no hard stops on it as far as like the calibration. And then that way you can infinitely turn it in both directions in order to deal with the lens.
Yeah, I mean, you can't infinitely turn the knob. Like the knob on the follow focus units is not infinite turn.
So depending upon how fast you swing that puppy around, if you're in this really weird situation, you could have lenses that just straight up don't work with the follow focus.
It's very possible. Might have to try that out.
I guess that's something to keep in mind. Like you don't like, especially since you're like on the XH2S, you can set to linear. Like, I don't think you're going to have that issue there, but it's almost something to keep in mind of like, if you were going to use it on another camera or whatever, you could run into a thing where it just doesn't work across the board for everything. Yeah. They've thought about as much as they can, but they can only do so much.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a potential problem for sure. I don't know. You know, I think a shoulder rig is a really obvious use of a follow focus because the lens is not close to where you can, like, it's harder to focus, you know, without that. I mean, I've always been interested in it just for a handheld rig, just so that I can have my hand on a hand grip instead of on the lens. I felt like maybe I could get more stable shots. Maybe it would feel nicer to hold. And then, I mean, you know, the other obvious use is like doing a production where you want to have a camera in a fixed position and you want somebody to pull focus, you know, without touching the camera. So I think there are uses for them, but it's definitely a niche thing. And it really runs the risk of being like a, you know, adding complexity to your kit without getting benefit. I think that's the concern.
I mean, it's more batteries you have to deal with. And like now you're powering a monitor and the follow focus and the camera. And it's just, I don't know.
I don't know if it's worth it.
If you had to get one like right now, which one would you get?
I would probably get the Magic Fiz, especially on sale. But it seems like you can get a good kit for a reasonable price. And as far as I can tell, it checks all the boxes.
Cool. But if you weren't in a hurry and you could wait 6 months for them to come out with the new Nano or the new Tilta follow focus, you could find something that's 4 times lighter, 4 times stronger, 4 times cheaper, just across the board. 200%.
200% improvement.
200% improved.
I mean, how do we go wrong with that?
I mean, honestly, it feels like worth the wait. So
maybe so.
I don't know, man. Cool. Anything else?
No. I think we covered all the things.
All right, great.
That's going to do it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you enjoyed it, we'd encourage you to rate us on iTunes and tell your photography friends about the show. Also, check out our website at cameragearpodcast.com to learn more or send us feedback and questions. We'll be back with more next week.